Hello everyone, welcome to our session on powering up SharePoint and Office 365 business applications. This is the first of a three-part series. This session, session 1, will cover UI UX, end users matter. Session 2 will cover workflows and business processes, the heartbeat of any application. And session 3 will cover reporting and analytics, driving continuous service improvement. In this session, we're going to focus on UI UX and users matter. This is important for any application success. In order to be successful, end users have to use it, obviously, and that's what the topic will cover in this session. So some of the objectives are what are the benefits of improving user adoption? What are some of the things holding it up in SharePoint? What are some common UI UX enhancements available in SharePoint and Office 365? How they might apply to your business applications? And how are these tactics deployed by Crow Canyon in Crow Canyon's Nitro application layer for SharePoint and Office 365? So that's what we'll cover in session 1. The other 2 sessions will be complementary to this. So if you have a chance to see all 3, please do that, and they tie together quite well in helping guide some principles of application design. So here I am, the presenter. I have my pumpkin there. I'm the founder and president of Crow Canyon Systems. We have been doing SharePoint and Office 365 development for many, many years. We have customers all over the world. We support, enhance, develop our applications. There's a set of core business applications out of the box, as well as we have done a number of custom development projects. We'll go into that a little more later, but let's just jump right into the UI UX session today. So first we look at user adoption. Why is user adoption important? Well, because in SharePoint there's been a perennial problem of user adoption. Here's one statistic, 66%, too difficult to use, from a recent article in Redmond magazine. The point is that this is a common thing you'll find on the internet if you do look for SharePoint user adoption kind of searches. You'll find a lot of complaints or unhappiness or low adoption rates. So of course user adoption is very important, because if users don't use it, it doesn't get used and they don't benefit from it. The organization doesn't benefit. The application isn't as efficiently used or productive as it could be. User adoption, what drives it? Well, strategic UI UX choices. Well, let's look at like the common user experience. We want to go from this kind of, oh, I'm so frustrated, to a nice, calm, simple, easy to use interface where there's a comfort with using the familiarity with using the program. So we look at what a likable product is, a likable application. User friendly, simple, intuitive, easy to use, works as expected. All these are pretty obvious common sense, but it's amazing how many times when people develop applications from a technical sense, they don't take these into consideration. Here at Crow Canyon, this is a very important part of our development and our strategy of applications, is that how will people interact with the application? How will they use it? What is their user experience? How can that be improved and help bolster user adoption? That's what we'll be taking a look at soon. First, I wanted to mention this buzzword I've heard recently, digital workplace. This seems to be making the rounds. Microsoft's talking about digital transformation. Some people are renaming their intranets to digital workplaces, which is not quite right, but it's the concept is that everybody's trying to jump on this digital workplace bandwagon. But I saw an interesting definition from Gartner that it's really about making a more consumer-like computing environment. And that's really what we're talking about here. People in your organization are much more familiar with websites and smartphones, and they're much more what they call digital dexterous. They have much more digital dexterity, and that is what they're expecting in business applications more and more these days. They want to have that same kind of intuitive, simple interface that they get in the consumer applications, whether it's going to an airline reservation or banking or other kinds of social media, Facebook, those kind of things. They're very used to that kind of interface. Here we have another diagram from Gartner, and this one says engaging employees. So I noticed that this one circle is one of the critical components of this consumer-like computing environment, is engaging employees. So let's jump into some ways that can be done in the SharePoint and Office 365 environment. So we have the UI UX, user interface, user experience, some tactics that work. Well, we take it from this approach that you have to have forms that people are going to fill out. There's input. there has to be a question made, a request made, a complaint, a need for something. Something has to be done that the user communicates to the people in charge or people who are running the application that there's a need and it needs to be fulfilled and resolved. So how do you do that? Well, one way to get users engaged is using good forms. Well, good forms are interactive, dynamic. They can validate inputs to make sure the data getting in the back end is correct, has all the information required. It can pull in information from other data sources like Active Directory and external databases, whether CRMs or ERPs or membership databases, order tracking, purchasing databases, financial. And it should also be able to initiate workflows and business processes. Now we'll get into the workflows and business processes in the second session more. But for this one, we're going to focus on making up a good form that has interactivity, dynamic elements, and the other qualities that make it useful and engaging for the end user. So in SharePoint and Office 365, there's quite a range of forms. There's forms on SharePoint Lists. That means using a list and then not using the standard out-of-the-box form, but using a form layer on top that makes it appear in a much more engaging interface. There's custom .NET pages, kind of like portals. Then there's also Access, Word, or Excel that could be used. Forms could be used for that. PDF forms, and also various platforms have forms designers. But for this purpose of this webinar, we're going to focus on the top two, forms on SharePoint List and custom .NET pages. There's qualities, pros and cons to the other three, but we won't delve into that at the moment. So let's go into forms on SharePoint Lists and custom .NET pages. Forms on SharePoint Lists mean essentially that you have a list in SharePoint or Office 365, you open up an item and what appears. Well, if you have the standard out-of-the-box form, it's not very useful, but there's other ways it can be presented by using this, what we have in Crow Canyon we call a Forms Manager. Now, there's a number of tools that do this, similar type functionality, in that they interrupt, in a sense, the presentation of the new item and put a layer on it that gives it functionality in this kind of presentation. So let's look at what a form looks like. Here's a form out of the box, SharePoint. It's not even a form really, it's just a list item. And you can see that has many, many fields on it in a way that just is not very engaging or interactive or really useful. And maybe this would be useful if you only had a few fields here, but once you get beyond that level, you need to go to a different presentation style, and that's what our Forms Manager does. So let's look at what our Forms Manager will produce. And here's a form, a list item that's been generated by the Crow Canyon Forms Manager. And let's examine the elements of it that make it more engaging and interesting and relevant to the user. Well, one thing is tabbing, and this tabbing groups the different fields in different fields on different tabs according to it. And you can also set it up so that there are tab permissions, so certain user groups will see certain tabs and others won't. So that keeps it simple. There are also different tabs here. We have different information on it, related items, work log. So there's quite a ability to put in, categorize information in ways that are relevant and important. Now, all this is configurable with 100% no code, kind of another buzzword, I guess, but 100% no code utility that runs behind the scenes in our application administration to allow you to set up what tabs and what fields are on those and how they interact. Now let's go look at a little more of the dynamic aspect of this form and go into that. Well, here's a form for an asset, same style with the tabs at the top. Again, this is configurable entirely inside our application administration and the Forms Manager tool. You can set up different tabs any way you want. But in this case, we have it functioning. So if you choose asset category, the computer tab is there. If I choose a different category, say tablet, the tab disappears. So this is something to show that in real time it's showing or not showing a particular tab. This can also apply to different fields. It could be fields below this that if you choose some phone or whatever, it would show up a model of phone or date of expiration, date of when the contract expires, whatever information it can about that. So the fields would be applicable to what other choices are made. This is what gives it some dynamic elements to it. So back on the, if we go into this and go into the mode here, we'll see some other important elements of this form. And that is that there are, let's see, open it up. There are ways to connect to outside databases. We have ability to connect if it's a ticket or an employee who it's assigned to, this connects to Active Directory. We have ability to connect to network discovery tools such as Lansweeper or SCCM, other ones, basically anyone. And that's done by these line of business custom columns that go out and make the form more interactive and responsive to different input from the user. So let's go to History and Finance, and you'll see that here you have contracts listed as related items that are part of this, pulling in information from other lists and showing it. Also the Dell warranty info, where you can click there and you go out and make a call to an API Dell provides in order to draw information in on that. In the support tab, you'll see some more of the related items listed. These are tasks related to the asset. So the point here is that we're trying to drive user adoption. We're trying to make it more engaging and interesting for the user by presenting all the information that's there through tabbing, dynamic forms, permissions on the tabs, permissions on columns, mandatory fields, validation of fields, and custom columns. We can look at some of the custom columns right here that are included in our applications, but these are available to anybody who's doing this application development. You might put a cascaded lookup, so it depends on the type depends on the category, or the location depends on the state, or whatever. Kind of these cascaded lookups. Cross-site lookups, where you're looking at information from different SharePoint sites, color choice fields, associated items, that's the related items, discussion columns that make a better multiple line of text field where you're recording who said what, date, time stamps, names, all that, and profile information, database connections. So there's quite a number of ways you can enhance your forms with these custom columns. Now back to the Forms Manager, you can attach files, you can put user information in, interact with databases, related items. This is shown in our Forms Manager, that's our example, but this is what's necessary in any good form tool that you want to use in order to drive user adoption and engagement. Also the ability to initiate workflows based on, say, a particular category of ticket, launches an approval process or automatic assignment, or sets an SLA. Those kind of things like that are all part of Forms, a good form tool. Now let's look at some of these a little bit more. Here's an example of where this is pulling from Active Directory, this information. Here's where related emails are listed on the form. Here's where related items are listed. Now I showed some of that already in the demo earlier, but the point here is that there's a lot of interactivity, a lot of capabilities with this Forms Manager tool. You also can set up different actions and capabilities so that when the form is being viewed, you're able to take those kind of actions and do what's necessary and appropriate to that particular kind of request or problem or issue or whatever. So all this is very customizable, very interactive, making it so easy for the customer or the user, the employee, whatever, to come in and make the request and move it through its course to resolution. Now, we'll move on now to portal pages. These are the custom .NET pages I've been talking about. These are a little different than the forms on SharePoint Lists. The forms on SharePoint Lists are using basically a tool, a forms manager of some kind, whether our Forms Manager or others, to display the information in a way that's much more presentable, as we just looked at. But the portal pages take a different approach, where they develop a whole page unto itself. This could have many different characteristics and elements on it. Based on the .NET capabilities, it's able to present this ASP page, and then still residing in SharePoint, but have a lot of capabilities in it. It usually is configurable. Sometimes, if you do it yourself, of course, it's configurable, but for example, in our portals, we provide tools to give some configuration to it, again with 100% no coding, as the set goes, to configure the portal. Now, one important point here about these portal pages is the security proxy. That means that we're going to present only the information for that user that's relevant for him or her. We're not going to go to unless you wanted to, but the idea is with the security proxy will limit the information that's conveyed from the back end to the front end of this portal. So that therefore you can say, okay, my end users will only see their tickets they're the requester, where they made the request. They're only the tickets in their department, or only the tickets, well, if it's a technician, the tickets that are assigned to them, or the requests that are assigned, or if they're approvers, they would see only the ones where they're required to approval. So that is very different than going to the back end list, where you can display all the information that is there in the system without only way you could restrict it perhaps is with item level permission. So it gets difficult to restrict it from one person who has rights to one item to having rights to all the other items, and that's important especially in ticketing or HR. Now here's our portal. We got the Empire State Building here in the background. So in this portal, kind of an IT help desk oriented portal, a person can submit a ticket, view their tickets, look up knowledge base. We also could include a service catalog or other functionality here. There's lists of FAQs or notifications about different aspects of it. Also quick tickets so they can make a hardware request or request remote access. Things like that. Can be put onto this page, and it can be designed or configured in many different ways. So we have the configuration tool that allows this portal configuration to go on without the coding or 100% no coding. There I go again, that buzzword. So that admin can make changes so the end users will see a different form. They can change the logo, the picture in the back, colors, the footer, the menus. I mean, there's this enormous amount of capabilities here in configuring this portal. What's on the new page. This doesn't have to be here. It could be a different icon or no icon. What columns are shown, what order they're in. It's just very wide range of capabilities that are in this portal settings options, all the way to having your own theme, so you can create your own theme and then use that in portal, so that you have capabilities to make it look and feel like how your users wanted to, in order to make them feel familiar and engage with it, interact with it, and have the experience of more consumer-like experience. Now this is also responsive, so there'll be responsive design. It'll show up on tablets and smartphones and those kind of things. So this is another way of form style of input. Here is the portal pages using custom.NET pages. Those can be developed by your team if someone knows .NET well enough, or you can use an existing portal and modify it yourself. Quite a lot of options with that. Again, very different than the forms on SharePoint Lists. They both have their usefulness and functionality in different situations. Quite common, we find that the end users or perhaps customers will be engaging with a portal, where the technicians and the people who are doing the actual resolution or answering the questions or fulfilling the hardware request or whatever, or managing the assets, they tend to work more on the back end with that more capabilities of being right on the list itself and all the capabilities in that form. So you can use whichever one works to your best advantage on that. You have both options. So now that we've covered forms, let's move into another aspect of the UI UX in SharePoint and Office 365, and that's what lists look like. What do lists look like? Well, in your standard out of the box, you pretty much have your list of tickets. Here's an example live. No formatting, it's a list. You can do a lot with lists. I admit you can do, change the view, group, sort. You can have different ways, maybe by category. So these are out of the box, but still, compared to what's possible in a stylized or customized type interface, now you've got a lot more capabilities. You have some tickets showing up in yellow because they're high priority. That's our color indicator. You can set any kind of choice to show different colors. You have bold. You have different styling up here. You have capabilities that make the information more presentable and engaging. You can see the stark difference between these two right here. And then if we look at some of the various elements we talked about, highlighting, color indicators, bolding, choice of view. So there's quite some capability in here to make the UI UX of the list view more engaging also. That's one. Next, we'll move on to sites. And sites are SharePoint sites, of course, or Office 365. In those, you can have configurable workspaces, dashboards, and branding. So let's take a little look at that right now and see what we have. So in the configurable workspace world, now what we're doing here, let me bring one over here, the screen. Okay, here's a manager dashboard, a configurable workspace. It has various areas, elements, web parts, or as they call them, or sections. These would be apps in Office 365. They have various things you want to display. Here's a list of overdue tickets, different graphs, and we'll get more into the graphs and charts in our reporting and analytics side of the session 3 of this series. But right now you can see they're displayed here, and different information. Well, these pages, these workspaces can be role-based, and this is the manager, or staff has a workspace. Staff workspace could be oriented towards only showing the tickets for that person. It could be a departmental workspace. These are basically pages in SharePoint or Office 365 that you can go in and edit and make up how you want to look with the different web parts that are available. Depending on what web parts you have available in your system, you can make up some really interesting, highly configurable pages. There's usually many web parts available, visual displays, pertinent information. So now What we're doing is presenting information that is relevant, pertinent, important for that particular role to engage with so that they can get their work done and decide what is the next step or what needs to be done or get information that's important to move any ticket or problem or question or issue through to resolution. Dashboards work in pretty much the same way, same idea, but they are more about showing information graphically with visual displays, counters, gauges, meters, and drill downs. So let's take a look at that also in our live system. So here we go. You have your counters, your arcs, or we call this tiles and dials. So here's our arcs over here, our dials showing different gauges. These are counters. And you can also, this is important for UI UX work, is that you don't only see it, but you can also say what 18 tickets are they talking about here. So you go in and you drill down, and here's your 18 tickets displayed in that ticket view. So it's the same with asset management or customer support or any program you want to put together inside of SharePoint and Office 365. These are important elements to have to engage users and get them using the system and finding it useful, intuitive, and hopefully simple and straightforward. So next is branding. Branding can take many different shapes and forms. In this case, they put a lot of gold on because that's their corporate colors. Put the logo in, different fonts. Even fonts can make a difference as to company look, layout, and basically what we're trying to achieve is a certain tone or theme that makes the user feel familiar with what they're doing. With they're going to a place that's not foreign or seems like completely disconnected from other work they're doing in the organization. So this works a lot with the portals and the branding, so that when in the employee service center we have, for example, is so that the person comes there and feels like, oh, I'm in the corporate world here of my corporation, and I can engage in it in a friendly and useful way to get work done or make a request and do what I need to move along. And then, of course, mobile and responsive design are very important, and those are always incorporated into these applications, and as they should be, because you cannot design just for the desktop anymore. Every application has to be available, whether it's a form or a portal or whatever, or, list views, all that available in the to someone using a tablet or smartphone in the mobile, called the mobile and cloud first world that we're moving towards here. So, I talked about Office 365, but I want to make some points on that and some caveats, cautions, provisos, whatever. The point is that there's guidelines for modifying Office 365, and anybody doing this kind of development has to be aware of that and not get caught up in some change that's made by Microsoft in Office 365. Because guess what? They're not going to call you up and ask you, hey, Microsoft's not going to ask, hey, I'm going to make this change. How will it affect your environment? But they do, instead of calling us, they actually provide guidelines that are important to follow. And right now, some of the most current, most obvious recommendations are don't use custom master pages, don't use custom site templates, and of course, sandbox solutions are now verboten. They've basically shut the door on those entirely. What the point here is that user 65 user experience is continually evolving, and Microsoft will put things out there and they expect you to be following the guidelines. We'll have some more information about this topic in emails we send out. And there's a lot of information on the web. There's a lot of guidance that's there. Just want to make a point to really, we do it here at Crow Canyon, but if you're doing any application development inside of Office 365, be very aware of possible impacts from modifications in Office 365 environment that might come down the pike. When we do Office 365, there's certain considerations that are very top of the mind. One point I want to make is that we developed 100% native components. If you're doing this kind of work, you make apps, don't just convert on-premise web parts. You don't use sandbox solutions. Develop SharePoint hosted apps, provider hosted apps that can do that. So that's what we've done here at Crow Canyon. We have the on-premises. We had that going for a long time, and then we moved several years ago into the Office 365 space and developed the application components, the apps or add-ins natively in that Office 365 environment. So let's take a look a little bit at what we have here in Office 365. Okay, I'll move that over. Now this is our Office 365. I've been showing you a lot of on-premises, but the point is the look and feel and UI UX are pretty much the same. This is very much like the dashboard I just showed recently, and we have the same idea of this tiles and dials with the overdue tickets and this. The tickets list is the same idea. It's almost like you would not even know you're in the different environment. Underneath this whole Office 365 is completely different apps. There aren't web parts the same we use on-premises. The on-premises web parts and sandbox and solutions, all that produces the same, but it is a different development world than this Office 365. Yet the same result. It's like convergent evolution in a way. You get the same result, the same look and feel if taken in the right direction, more or less, as you get in the on-premises, which is quite important to do, to achieve. And it's one of Microsoft's goals to make a seamless environment between on-premises and Office 365 in terms of look and feel and functionality. So if we look at one of the tickets here, one of the list items, you see again it has that tabbed functionality, and different tabs show up different, different fields on it. Again, highly configurable inside the Forms Manager we have here. Also, there's the manager dashboard is very similar, using graphs and charts just like we do on premises, all built with native 100% Office 365 coding. We have SharePoint hosted apps and we have provider hosted apps. SharePoint hosted apps are doing a lot with the forms and the lists and the cascading, and provider hosted apps are doing a lot with the more workflow and email synchronization and database integration type things. So it's a different environment, yet it comes out to look in pretty much the same. I wanted to switch over to the employee portal here to show you that that is pretty much the same also in both places. A different background, of course, but the same idea of submit, view, that. And this can be developed in many different ways also. So there's a lot of UI overlap or commonalities between on-premises and Office 365, but they come from very different places. Quite interesting how that can be achieved in that way. Because the principles of UI, UX, and what drive user adoption are the same no matter what environment you're working in. You want the simple, intuitive, you want to have good forms, views that are engaging of the list, dashboards and workspaces, all that, and how to achieve that in your applications, whether it's on premises or Office 365 native. So let's move right into Nitro. Nitro, what is Nitro? Well, let's find out. Nitro is an application layer that is unique to Crow Canyon that we developed specifically to enhance SharePoint and Office 365. Being that we are engaging with customers around the world over and over and doing custom projects as well as the out-of-the-box applications, there was a need to develop a layer on top of SharePoint and Office 365 that produced the capability that's missing inside of those platforms. That's UI UX capabilities, workflows and business process capabilities, as well as reporting and analytic capabilities. This allows us to develop applications that are flexible, easily deployed. They're supported all in the common framework of Nitro. We build out-of-box applications and do custom projects. Here's a diagrammatic way of looking at it. It's an application layer that sits on top of SharePoint Office 365, enhancing the UI, UX, the workflows, and the reporting, allowing us to produce core business applications as well as custom development. In one other area that's in here, there is the integration with other databases and data sources, and that's also part of the Nitro layer. Again, that point that Nitro, it was built for Office 365 natively, using apps and add-ins, built specifically Office 365, no sandbox solution, no legacy on-premises features or code. Everything in there is coming right out of the Office 365 world, using or following all the Microsoft standards and guidelines for that kind of development, so that they're future-proofed in the sense that as Microsoft makes changes to the Office 365 environment, our apps, our Nitro layer is in accordance with that and will not get upset by changes in Office 365 because we're following those guidelines. With a Nitro for our SharePoint 2013 or 2016 on-premises, follows the on-premises model using web parts and sometimes apps also built specifically for SharePoint on-premises, giving us a wide range of capabilities that are available on-premises, and they also follow the standards for SharePoint development in that environment. We use Nitro, our application layer, to build a wide range of applications. We have a set of core business applications like IT help desk, asset management, customer support, facilities requests, facilities management, maintenance. We have equipment tracking, contract management, purchasing, onboarding in the HR world. These all run on the Nitro platform, but they incorporate those UI UX elements we've been talking about with the Forms Manager, how the forms look, what's the input. We have ability for engagement with other outside sources, such as somebody could use email or a web form to submit information into the system. They could use the portal. They could go directly to the SharePoint and create the form on the SharePoint list. There's many ways offered, but the concept, the underlying concept, especially in regards to this session on UI UX, is that They have to be engaging, simple, intuitive ways for people to work with these programs that we provide. We also do other type programs that are perhaps a little bit less common but used also. Security access requests has become quite important with us. HR requests, including the onboarding. Compliance workflows for electric and gas providers, gas energy, any energy provider that has to follow certain government guidelines in order to meet audits and regulatory requirements. Legal requests kind of ties somewhat into contract management. Document management, marketing materials, membership services or citizen services where we're interacting with perhaps a membership database or version of customer support, office supplies, which is a kind of simple request management system. And we also have done many custom projects such as claims management for insurance provider, their agents or their customers to enter in claims and follow through the claims process, which is quite convoluted, involves multiple steps and multiple engagement with other entities and garages and fix-it shops and finance. I mean, just amazing number of workflows and everything incorporated into it, all done on Office 365. Checks and vouchers, quote generators, guideline documents for healthcare provider, essential assets for a nuclear power plant. That's like taking our asset management, implying the compliance and the contract and all that, and making it so that these assets that are in the nuclear power plant are maintained. Well, we certainly hope they are, don't we? Maintained and serviced correctly, and not only for the obvious reasons of correct operation, but also to meet government and regulatory requirements. Library setup, equipment management. That's just some small example of the type of programs that we've been doing here in Office 365 and SharePoint. So next steps, how can you keep this moving forward? You can attend the next two sessions. If you're seeing a recording of this after these dates, this is 2016, October 18th, 2016, and November 3rd. We'll have these recordings of these sessions available, so you might just go from one recording to the next on that. And then here's some information on how to stay in touch. We have the Twitter, LinkedIn, a blog, of course, a website and the blog. sales@crowcanyon.com and our phone number. Please get in touch if you have any questions or issues or ideas, whatever. We're always very glad to talk extensively about UI UX, how it can be improved. We also go to a lot of shows. If you go to SharePoint Fest or SharePoint TechCon or SharePoint Saturdays, also, we're speakers usually at some of these shows, such as the Collab 365 Global Conference. So we're very much in tune with the SharePoint and Office 365 community, and we'd love to hear from you. And thank you for attending this. And be sure to check out Session 2 and Session 3 of this three-part series. Thank you very much.